I am now going to turn it over to Courtney Buchan, our co-host for today from GRS Community Management. Courtney, take it away. And after you're done, you can go straight to introducing Alan, our
Awesome.
main event for today. I'm just the opening act.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, my name is Courtney Buchan. I am the corporate trainer for GRS Community Management. I'm also a licensed community association manager and a board member myself. So a little bit about GRS. We are a mid-sized management company based out of Lake Worth, Florida. We service everyone across the great state. So if you're happy with your management company, I love that. But if you're not happy, definitely check us out on LinkedIn and then our website, grsmgt.com. We would love to provide a free proposal to you. So I'm so excited for today's webinar. This really was an interesting topic. So big thank you to Alan for putting this together.
You're
So
welcome.
Alan's over at the Winter Springs. I didn't forget today, the Winter Springs office for Cape Bender Rembam, but they also have offices in Pompano, Palm Beach Gardens, and Tampa. Sorry, I had to think about
Got it.
Tampa.
Sorry,
So
Kirsten.
Alan,
Sorry, Kirsten.
I almost forgot, but I didn't forget Tampa. We love working with Cape Bender Rembam. They do a lot for board members and community association managers. Definitely check them out on their website, kbrlegal.com. They are always, always, always providing more of these courses to board members and managers. So again, thank you so much, Alan, for putting this together. He put this whole presentation together today and got this all certified. So I'm so excited. We had a lot of interest here at GRS for this course. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to you, Alan, to get us started.
All right. Well, thank you, Courtney. Thank you to GRS for having us today. And, I know Courtney mentioned a little bit about our firm, just very briefly, 4 offices, as she mentioned, 25 attorneys, 8, including myself, board certified in this area of community association law, another board certified specialist in construction law. So basically, anything a community association needs, we're here for you. If you're happy with your attorney, as Courtney mentioned regarding your management firm, great. Keep with them. Enjoy the information. Hope you take something with you. If you're not happy or you don't have an attorney, hope you'll reach out. My contact information is on the screen right now. It'll also be provided in the slides, which I know there was at least one question, and those will be available to you after you fill out the survey when we're done today. So let me go ahead and share my screen, get the slides up for you. And there we go. So should be able to see now. And let's go ahead and get started. All right, so preliminary information about the class is right here. I'm not going to go through everything, but again, this is where you'll find my email address if you need anything. If you have questions about credits, things like that, please reaching out to me is not going to get you anywhere other than me forwarding your email on to somebody else, which is going to be this seminars@kbrlegal.com email address. So if you got questions about your credits, about getting the materials, certificates, etc. Please, I'm not the right guy, although I'm happy to hear from anyone that's here today, all 400 plus of you. All right, this is some information about me that I will not go through in detail, but you're welcome to read later. So, getting started in earnest, why the heck would we install cameras in a community association? This is my home. Why are you installing cameras? Well, one, if there's damage, covenant violations, things of that nature, we want to actually have evidence. So there are a lot of violations, for example, that it happens once. If you don't see it, you don't, one, know who did it. Two, you can't confirm that it actually happened, but it's still a problem. So this will create some evidence that this violation occurred and who caused the problem. If there's damage, for example, we're dealing right now with a situation. I won't name the community or the owner, but an owner ran right into a condominium garage and basically destroyed the outer garage door. Well, if we didn't have video of that, we'd be looking to see if anyone's rear end or front end of their vehicle is damaged instead of knowing it was this person, they caused it on this time at this date, and we've got everything we need to try and recover those funds instead of the entire community remaining responsible for those damages. Other reasons that you might consider these cameras, you're trying to get rid of crime in the community. If someone knows that they're on camera, because presumably, we'll talk about this later, but you've got some signage up in the community that says that this is recording, they might be less inclined to sit there and rob someone or do something even worse that, you really don't want someone doing in your community. The other thing that you're doing in recording this and hopefully dissuading that crime is complying with the director's fiduciary duty to the association. Because if you know that there were specific instances of crime, that there's a likelihood that that crime is going to recur, meaning if there's a string of robberies or thefts within the community, the board might have the actual legal obligation. The association might, but the individual directors also might have that obligation to actually protect the members and the residents and the visitors from that type of crime happening again. It becomes foreseeable when it's happened, let's say 2 or 3 times, possibly even once. So you want to make sure that you're doing what you can to dissuade crime. Putting up cameras is one way of doing that. There's also the security obligations that some Florida community associations might have. Your governing documents may say that the association, through the board, has the obligation to keep the property safe and secure. Okay? Maybe it says it, maybe it doesn't. But your attorney should be taking a look at your governing documents if you do or don't have cameras, regardless, to make a determination. Do we have to have some kind of security measures in the community? And especially, like I mentioned, when you have prior instances of crimes that have occurred in the community. There is case law regarding who's responsible and when it comes to crimes that take place or damages that take place within a community association. You might need signage or some kind of notice that security is being used. That might obligate the association to actually provide that security. So if your signage actually says that this is being recorded 24/7 and that it's monitored 24/7, you can't just have that sign that goes up and then have no one monitoring 24/7 and it only records for 8 hours out of the day and then rolls over. Okay, it's got to be that your signage is accurate and that it is going to indicate what's really going on with respect to these cameras in your community. There is a law that came about, I think it was 2 years ago, the Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. This is a Florida statute. That could also help the association if you're complying with its requirements. It's intended to address apartment complexes, but I have seen some judges extend that to condos and HOAs now. And what it basically says is you're protected from a claim of negligent security if you follow certain restrictions and requirements regarding lighting in the community, landscaping, not blocking the view around the corner, so to speak, access controls, meaning that you have actual keys that keep people out of the community, or some kind of code or something like that that lets you in without everyone in the world being able to just walk into the community. Signage, like I mentioned, no trespassing, and if you've got video cameras, things of that nature, you put signage up about those. If it's secured and monitored, you put that kind of signage up. There's also provisions regarding maintenance of the community. If you're keeping it in good condition or not is a factor in whether or not you're protected by this law. And then there are other security measures that are described in it, including specifically cameras being installed in the community and used. You've also got private security licensing issues. If you've got a private security company, do they require you to have cameras in the community, or are they just promoting having cameras in the community to make their job easier when something goes wrong? Because let's be honest, having private security is a valuable commodity, but it doesn't 100% protect your community. I mean, I can say from personal experience, when I was growing up down in Boca, I was living in Boca Raton in a really nice community. It was gated, it was locked up, but there was a string of thefts within the community, and we found out it was still by people that didn't live there because the guard was not being as strict as they should in who they were letting in and who they weren't. So, you don't want to create that false sense of automated security just because you have private security, whether that's the gate or a police officer or a security company that's driving through your community. Moving on, when we go to install these cameras, how are we going to do it? What are we going to consider? The first consideration, in my opinion, is contact your insurance agent. Find out whether this is going to protect you from some kind of insurance claims. If so, great. That's justification for why you should be doing it. If it's not, and it's just going to cost you more money, then it's up to the board. But if it's going to actually create potential liability because of the way that you're doing this, you'll want to know that from your insurance agent as well. And, obviously you want to get an opinion from your attorney as to that potential liability. But let's be honest, your insurance agent probably won't charge you for the opinion, whereas your attorney probably will. So what you'll want to do is get that information from your insurance carrier or your agent to say, hey, if you're going to install these, here are the locations based on our investigation that'll be best protective and that will potentially reduce your overall insurance rates and better protect you from insurance claims. You also need to consider what vote actually needs to be taken before these cameras can be installed. Generally speaking, this is a material alteration of your common areas, common elements. So it might be necessary to actually even get a member vote. Now, there's case law that helps you work around that your attorney should be able to explain to you. Usually, if there's something that's a more protective measure, you can work your way around this material alteration vote, possibly the expenditure vote, because the board has the obligation to do everything in its power within reason to protect the association. Even if you're spending more than whatever the cap is in your governing documents, it might be something that the board has to decide whether to take the risk of having the members refuse to allow them to spend the money on something that is protective, like a camera or a camera setup. Keep in mind when we say cameras, we're not just talking about a single one, we're talking about a system. So, does this expenditure benefit and protect the association better than what's there now? If the answer is yes, there may be a way around having to get a member vote. But again, I wouldn't just rely on the fact that Alan Schwartzseid said maybe during a webinar. I would get guidance directly from your association counsel. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have association counsel, at that point, feel free to reach out. But, I don't know of many, if any, attorneys that will be able to give you a legal opinion without being your legal representative. So to the extent that I'm doing the Q&A, I want everyone to understand, because we didn't mention it yet, anything that we say during this webinar, even if you're a client, please understand that's not intended as legal guidance. We're not creating any attorney-client relationship by you attending this webinar. It's just intended for general information that hopefully will be good enough for you guys to hear, listen to, and take back to your board or take back to your counsel to the extent that legal guidance is needed. All right, moving back into the materials, your governing documents, as I mentioned, might require a member vote. Now, in HOAs, there's no statute that says that a material alteration requires a member vote. That vote is only required if your governing documents say so. Okay, keep in mind also, there might be case law around it, even if you're required to get that vote. In a condo, you do have a statute that's specifically on point that says that this is a 75% member vote to perform a material alteration unless the governing documents say you have a lower percentage. Now, I've been using this phrase. I just realized I didn't explain what a material alteration is. It's literally changing the appearance of anything within your community that the members are entitled to see. So we're not talking about inside someone's unit. In this instance, we're talking about changing the way a common element of your community or a common area of your community visibly looks. Are you visibly changing in some kind of appreciable way that people can see the way that one of your common elements looks, one of your common areas looks? So unless you are truly hiding these cameras, which is against what guidance I would give a client, presumably people are going to be able to see it. And now I mentioned this case law. Sterling Village is one of the cases that says there's no vote required for more protective measures or maintenance that the board is obligated to perform. So even if it is a material alteration, even if it does exceed the expenses that are described in your particular declaration, your other governing documents, you might not need that member vote anyway. So again, reach out to your attorney if you're not 100% sure. All right, continuing on, where can these cameras be located? Okay, the association only has the control and ability to install these cameras on common areas, common elements. You can't tell an owner, we're going to install a camera inside your unit, or we're going to put it on your lot. That's not an option. unless you've got some crazy easement set up that I haven't seen in practice before. Okay, unless you've got the ability to do that and the authority to do that from some recorded document that authorizes the association to install things on an owner's lot, and specifically to install cameras or protective measures. Security gates are a common location where these cameras might be located. We'll talk about audio recording laws later. Keep in mind, Florida is a two-party consent state, meaning that recording someone's audio if they didn't give their permission is a crime. We will explain what I mean later. But it's not just where can they be located on common areas, where can they be pointed is another question that I think is really important that a lot of boards seem to miss. You can't point the cameras at unit doors or windows or inside of a lot or inside of a unit. Okay, that's just not reasonable. People do have a reasonable expectation of privacy on their lots. Now, that doesn't mean that they can, walk around nude without a fence or any kind of blocking and it's no big deal. What it means is you can't sit there recording them while they're sitting on a lounge chair behind their fence in their backyard. Okay. It's just not, there is a reasonable expectation of privacy in certain areas. Any of those areas where you would expect to have your privacy and not be recorded, you shouldn't be putting cameras there. They also shouldn't be installed where the privacy expectation is even higher, meaning you're not going to put cameras in the bathrooms, the locker rooms, etc. of your gym, your clubhouse, whatever. Okay, these are places where it's not only that you have the expectation of privacy, it's a heightened expectation of privacy. Now we'll get into some of the criminal law considerations. And understand, we probably will be done with this early, so we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So if you think that I'm going through these slides, especially since you can see on your screen, I'm sure there's only 13 total. If you think I'm going through them relatively quickly, and if I'm talking too fast, I want to make sure that we get through this and you guys get the time for Q&A. So let's keep moving, but I just wanted to let you know we will have some time. I see there's already 18 questions in here, so that's fantastic. Voyeurism and cyber stalking. Okay, we've got quotes in here. These are crimes associated with someone having a reasonable expectation of privacy and either the association or someone else violating that reasonable expectation of privacy. All right, I mentioned the audio recordings. There are wiretap and audio recording laws in Florida. Here are the statutes that we're talking about. You need to have all parties consent to be able to record audio where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. So what does that mean for practical purposes? Where you're at your gate, you have to have your attorney tell you, presumably, whether there is a reasonable expectation of privacy when you're at the gate, which will dictate whether you should or should not have any kind of audio recording along with the video that you might have at that gate. Okay, that is a major consideration of whether you can or should use audio recording in conjunction with these video recordings anywhere you're putting a camera. Now, keep in mind when it comes to board meetings or member meetings, those are a different story. There is no reasonable expectation of privacy because it is truly a public meeting, although it's limited to the members. So what does that mean for all intents and purposes? That the members, regardless of these audio recording laws, are able and authorized to video and audio record every meeting of the board and every meeting of the members. Now, the good news is that is subject to reasonable rules adopted by the board. What that does not mean is that you can tell someone you can't record because you're in my way. It means you can adopt rules that enable you to say things like that, and that you can adopt rules that say the members cannot record in a manner that interferes with the meeting or interferes with everyone else's ability to observe the meeting. You can't tell someone you're not allowed to record unless they're not allowed to be there at all, in which case you're not telling them they're not allowed to record, you're just kicking them out. All right, notice and signage for cameras. There are legal requirements that are not, and keep in mind, most of the statutes that we're citing today have nothing to do with condos or HOAs. They're not in Chapter 718. They're not in Chapter 720. So this is why I'm putting them in there, so that anyone that needs to refer back and take a look can take a look at these laws. This one in particular talks about cameras located in public spaces. So that would include generally the common areas or common elements. The cameras, as I mentioned earlier, need to be visible, and the public needs to be informed of the recording. Generally, that's done via signage. Okay, because keep in mind, if you send a community-wide email that everyone in the association is able to read, you've notified everyone that lives there. But what happens when someone has a guest? What happens when someone has a vendor come to the property to deliver their Uber Eats? Okay, all of a sudden, you have not provided notice to that person that they might be recorded. So that signage should be visible, and it should be in conspicuous font as well. Again, signage should be conspicuous. You should be able to see it, is what that means. It should properly notify everyone. This is not a let's figure out a way around it. This is a let's provide real notice that there are video cameras and they are being used. Now, there is risk associated with the content of those signs if you're not being entirely accurate as to how those cameras are being used. Okay, avoid language that says that they'll be monitored 24/7 unless that's accurate. And by the way, I don't know of many communities outside of some of the ones that we represent in Coral Gables and some of the really finer areas, so to speak, of the state of Florida that actually have 24/7 monitoring that they pay for. That is a very expensive proposition. So in reality, most of the time, they're not really monitored.
Alan, I just need to remind everybody because it's piling up here. I'm sorry for interruption. The chat area is separate from the Q&A module. The chat area is reserved for questions for me, technical questions, questions about the evaluation, technical issues with the class, course questions, comments. Please use the Q&A section, not the chat area. Alan, sorry, back to you, sir.
That's okay. You're very rude and I'll be okay with it. That's fine.
Did you get that on
Okay.
camera? So anyway.
All right. So if you're not monitoring the cameras, that doesn't necessarily mean you should point out that you're not monitoring them. Just don't say you are on top of it and then say, well, you know, we kind of have to go back to the video to figure out what happened here because in reality, no one was monitoring them. You don't want to have to be the one that acknowledges we lied about this. It's not only that, though. It's the risk that because you're saying it's monitored 24/7, you're creating the implication that people are safer than you're actually making the effort to make them in your community. And so if someone does get injured, and let's say, for example, you know, I've got a community where unfortunately someone was injured at the pool. There are cameras at the pool. If those cameras had said, we are monitoring this, then when that person was found injured hours later, the question would be, well, if you're monitoring this, why don't you see this person lying on the ground injured? Okay, so you want to make sure that you're being clear and being candid about the level of monitoring you have. You know, if it's just for security purposes only, that's what the signage should say, in my opinion. Then we've got video versus photos. Okay, video is almost always going to be better evidence because it's not just a snapshot in time. It's a progression of what went down, what happened. So suggestion-wise, video is generally going to be better than a photo being taken because an event occurred. The other question that I hear a lot when we're talking about these cameras is, who's actually going to monitor? Is it 24/7? If so, who's responsible for that? Is it a company that we pay, a security company? Is it going to be nobody monitoring unless we have something come up so we can refer back to it? That's what I call just a security camera. You know, is it going to be a director, some other owner designated by the board? Hint, hint, don't do that one. Because the reality is that person doesn't have the same fiduciary responsibility, which is the highest duty imposed by law, that a director, officer, or manager might have. Who's going to cover the expense and what is it with respect to media storage versus, you know, the interests that we're weighing here is we want the evidence to be available, but do we want to hold that for 24 hours? Do we want to hold it for a week? Do we want to hold it for a month? Often what happens, someone gets injured. They don't tell anyone they were injured. They go to the doctor. They then call a lawyer, and it's 3 months after the incident that they're actually reporting back to the association, oh, I tripped and fell in your community. And in reality, it's, a law firm that's sending a demand to the association to maintain all of the records pertaining to this incident. But if you've got a policy that this is being deleted once a month, which nothing wrong with that, that is absolutely legal, that evidence is gone. So understand, you should have, if you're going to have these video recordings, you should also have a policy as part of your records retention policy, not necessarily part of it, but similar to it, I guess is more accurate. You should also have a policy that says, here is how and for how long we're going to store these videos before we destroy them, and that evidence is going to be gone and you can't get it back. We don't have it anymore. There's also videos as an official record as an issue that comes up. Is this an official record? Is it considered something that is written in accordance with the Florida statutes? Now, a little bit more expansion on that thought. Chapter 720 and Chapter 718 and also Chapter 719, which is the co-op statute, all say they all have a catch-all provision that says your official records of the association include any written record pertaining to the business operation of the association. Well, the question is this a written record if it's a video and it's digitally stored? And we've got a couple cases that say video recordings, the association and the board and member meetings are official records if the board makes them. I added well, what if rather than the board making these recordings, they're just being delivered to the association, but now the board has them? There's really nothing that clarifies whether this is an official record or not. Now, that's also distinct from the 2025 legislative requirement to record and maintain official records of virtual meetings in condos. The HOAs don't have that requirement yet. I think we can all see the trajectory of the legislature that eventually it probably will be required for HOAs to keep a record of those virtual meetings. Keep in mind when you have those virtual meetings that are recorded, the document that you're required to give is not, and let me step back. The document you're required to provide to someone who requests to inspect official records of the association is not the video itself. You can just provide a link rather than store it. So what I'm telling a lot of associations that we work with, they have the option of doing is, let's say that meeting was held via Zoom. You can keep that record for the 1 year that you're required to maintain it on Zoom and have the Zoom link be the one that's listed in your official records. Frankly, you can have one page with every Zoom link for every meeting you've had over that 1 year period that anyone can just scroll through and click into the meeting they want to see. And it doesn't require the association, or more importantly, management, to actually store the videos on their servers. Zoom keeps it on their servers instead. Now, if you're using Teams or some other, virtual platform, most, if not all of them, will allow you to do the same thing. You're not storing it in your own storage online or cloud storage. You're storing it on their servers, and they're giving you access for up to a year or however long to just click a link and have anyone that has that link access the document itself or the video itself. Who's entitled to access? Again, it depends on the content of the video. If it's a security video, probably only the board and the management and maybe the security company and counsel. It's not generally going to be the members that are entitled to that outside of discovery within a lawsuit where that is relevant information. Okay, it's not just, well, I sent my records inspection request, give me all your videos. Doesn't work that way. You should, as I mentioned, have a policy regarding how videos are used, taken, etc. So that policy, in my opinion, should include how you are going to use the video, how people in the community are allowed to use it. The recording, meaning what are we going to record? What are we not going to record? The storage I mentioned a minute ago, but let's say it's not via Zoom and it's something else. Does your security provider keep that and turn it over, more importantly, if you stop using that security provider? Do they give it to the association on a flash drive or something similar? When are you going to delete that and how? Is it just click a button and it gets deleted, or is it automated, which is my recommendation, so that no one can screw it up? If it's unit owners that are installing these, which we'll talk about in a minute, where are they allowed to install cameras? How are they allowed to install them? Make a rule that says they can't do it on a common area. They can't point it at someone else's lot or unit, etc. Those are use rules. Now, keep in mind, when you're talking about use of a unit or a lot, you're talking about a 14-day notice of a board meeting. It's still probably going to be the board that gets to make that decision. Run that one by counsel if you're not sure. And then again, we've got the comprehensive set of policies on everything that you do, including violations. Okay, so I've got a list of 8 or 9 policies that I think every community association in Florida should have. This happens to be one of them if you're using video recording. Moving on, we talked about unit owner cameras a second ago. Should they be allowed to be installed in the units or limited common elements? Frankly, I think that should be the absolute limitation on where the members and the residents are allowed to install these cameras. They should not be installing them on common elements. When I say limited common elements, that is further limited by the limited common elements that the unit owners are obligated to maintain. If the association's maintaining it and the owner is drilling into the wall that the association maintains, that shouldn't be allowed. Okay, so these are just things to keep in mind. And along the same lines of some of the things I mentioned earlier about where these should be pointed, we've got criminal law considerations that I mentioned earlier, voyeurism and cyber stalking. I'm not going to go through the full definition of each one, but you've got the statutory definitions here. Voyeurism is basically with intent that is, I'll just call it sexual, but it's, the statute says indecent. I don't know what indecent means. I don't know that there's case law outlining what it means, but it's when you secretly observe another person located in a dwelling, structure, or conveyance, meaning they're home, they're in their car, they're in a place where they thought they had a reasonable expectation of privacy, and the person that is doing this is observing intimate areas where the person has a reasonable expectation of privacy. When the other person is located in public or private dwelling, structure, or conveyance, what we're talking about is part of the body, under armor, so to speak. The goal is that you are not being a creep. In reality, that's what we're talking about. You're not, voyeurism is the legal definition of a peeping Tom. So that's really what we're talking about. Sorry to anyone named Tom that's on that. Wasn't talking about you in particular. Cyber stalking is the next one we're going to talk about. So it's to communicate, cause to be communicated, words, images, basically bad things through email or electronic communications directed at or pertaining to a specific person, or to access the online accounts or internet connected home electronic systems without that person's permission and causing emotional distress with no real purpose. So cyber stalking could include you videotaping someone. I know that in a community that I've represented, there was an owner who literally pointed their video camera from their lot to their neighbor's front door so that they could see when they were coming and going. And they had an automated notification on their phone so that they could walk outside and yell at this person every time that they left their house, whether that was morning, noon, night, whatever. That's probably cyber stalking. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but that's one that I would suggest the person that's being persecuted, so to speak, should report to police. And keep in mind, when these things happen, it's not the association's responsibility to play the law enforcement role. You can do your covenant enforcement, absolutely. But the reality is, when these things happen, you should also be mentioning to the person that complains about this behavior, listen, we're not the police. It's your prerogative to decide whether to report these things to the police. But to the extent you're concerned that it might be a crime, that's on you. Please go ahead and do it. We will do our part to keep our residents safe.
I have a question for you there,
Yeah.
because there's a few people mentioning Ring cameras in the Q&A. What if somebody has a Ring doorbell with a camera on it on their door in a condo, where the condo allows them to change to a different doorbell, a different, you know what I mean, a different thing.
Yeah.
Um, but it happens to have a camera. Is that something that people need to be alerted about?
So my perspective is if that, and this comes up most frequently in like the hallway situation in a condo. If the camera's pointing at the wall, fine. If it's pointing at a door, kind of fine, questionable. Get your opinion from your attorney on that one. But if it's pointing inside the door, that's a definite no-no. So it depends, is it pointed in the same direction that the door opens or the other direction?
It's pointing like for, I think
Let's
with
say
the
the door
person,
opens out, it's going to block the view of the unit. You probably have less of a concern than if the door opens in and you're videotaping the inside of someone's unit. But again, these are the types of things where, listen, you're probably fine if you're not pointing in the direction of another unit. For example, condos where everyone's unit is outside and you're just pointing, for if I was in my office right now pointing outside, I'd be looking at trees.
yeah.
No problem at all. But if
Well,
you're pointing at someone else's unit, you might have a problem.
well, here's the door. The side of my phone that you cannot see is the inside of the person's unit. They
Right.
have a doorbell on the outside of their door, and that doorbell happens to have a camera, so the camera's facing the hallway. Is that something that is an issue?
Again, it really depends when you're facing the hallway. Are you actually facing other units?
Okay.
Do you capture other units on that camera? If the
Okay.
answer is no, I don't think you've got a problem at all. The
Okay.
fact that people are walking through and happen to be captured, I mean, I get that at my office. I get, the people that walk in my neighborhood, even in an HOA, they
Yeah.
get recorded when they walk past my front door. Because, given what I do, I keep my security, pretty tight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
if you're pointing to the inside of the door, that's when I think you've definitely got a problem. If you're just pointed at the door, even if it's inadvertent, I think you've got a potential issue where if someone complained, I think you should probably just go ahead and move that doorbell camera. All of those can be mounted pretty much wherever you want.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
can be also aimed pretty much however you want as well. And that's why I say, from my perspective, the fact that it's pointed at a door, unless it's literally impossible because your doors are so close together, because you've got relatively small units or that's just the layout, it shouldn't be that difficult to get it done the right way, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
All right.
Good questions, though. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for keeping me remotely interesting. I appreciate it. So, systems maintenance. Keep in mind, you install these cameras. That doesn't mean it's game over and they're good for 20 years or permanently. You're going to have these ongoing maintenance issues. I was with Hotwire yesterday and they were talking about some of the issues that can pop up where, you lose internet, you have systems that can get fried. You can have situations like this come up. It's not frequent, but especially, I mean, we've got a hurricane going through Jamaica and up towards South Florida right now. A hotel where the event that's taking place this week would normally be held, the front floor is flooded right now. So you never know what crazy issues are going to pop up. You're going to have maintenance requirements. You're going to have to replace and repair some of these things, these cameras. So I would suggest not necessarily a camera reserve, but that you factor that into your budget once you're installing these cameras and not just presume that because it's been installed, you're going to be good to go for, 5, 10 years. Software updates come up frequently. You might need to get a better internet connection because of the quality of the cameras, especially if you had previous cameras and now you're upgrading. So there are costs that you need to make sure you've actually got covered. Make sure they're operable and adequately maintained. If you've got inoperable cameras or dummy cameras that never work and are intended to never work, keep in mind that's a false sense of security that you could be creating for the members or the residents or the visitors or anyone that ever comes to your community. And I would strongly suggest that you not do that and give that false sense of security and then lull people into believing they're safe when in reality, after that lawsuit's filed because someone did get hurt or even worse was, killed in your community, the criminal act might not be separated enough from the fact that you created that false sense of security. Forget about the politics of you led me to believe that you had these cameras, and now you're telling me you didn't get video of my husband being shot. It's situations like that that I've actually seen come up in practice that I really want anyone that's on this webinar to avoid. When we talk about upgrades, same situation as installing these things in the first place. Are we talking maintenance that the board is obligated to do of common elements, common areas, or is it a replacement? When we talk about, all of this, again, you want to go back through that analysis of what you considered when you were first installing the cameras. And then again, we talk about budgeting, not just for maintaining, repairing, and replacing these cameras, but also for the initial installation. Is this actually in your budget? Is it something that the governing documents authorize you to actually assess and levy assessments against the members and lots and units for? If the answer is no, you definitely want to get some kind of opinion of counsel. Now, the good news is if you see safety as a valid reason to levy assessments, chances are that's where this is included and you're okay. But again, I would run it by counsel if you're not 100% sure that your governing documents authorize this. And another issue, I think this is our last real slide, so to speak, but consider everything we've discussed. And now think about the fact that with a drone, those cameras are moving around. Okay. It's not just a stationary spot. So when we talk about the voyeurism, when we talk about the cyber stalking, we talk about not videoing areas that are intended to be private and where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. We have all these issues. I mean, I've seen, we mentioned covenant violation inspections via drone. There are companies that will now come out and do your inspections for you. And it's not just in HOAs where they're flying around on the streets of the community. I've actually seen it in condos where they're up 15 flights and they're flying the drone high up so that they can see. The intent is to see whether the windows, the sliding glass doors and all that are properly maintained, but they're also capturing what's inside those windows and sliding glass doors. That's a problem. Okay, so keep in mind, it's not just a stationary video camera that we're talking about. You saw Jeff pull out his cell phone. That includes his cell phone. Any camera we are talking about could be included in any of these considerations. So I think
what's interesting about the cell phone thing, Alan, when we teach the board certification classes and the condo CEU classes and such, we talk about the ability of people to record a board meeting if they want to record the board meeting. How does that fall into all this? I mean, you might have mentioned it earlier, but for some people,
but it's the same answer whether you're using a stationary camera or a cell phone that you're carrying with your hand. I mean, I'd be actually really interested to see someone that tries to record a board meeting via drone. But, the cell phone situation, even the cell phone that is situated on a stand or the standing camera, you got your typical 1980s video camera that's this big is now this big, but it still sits there. It's the same situation. The only thing that you want to do in advance of that meeting is, like I mentioned earlier, you want to adopt standards for how and when people are allowed to move around and record that video. You want to make sure that the standards don't allow them to interfere with others' observation with the meeting itself. They're not getting up in the board's face and saying, I'm watching you. It's none of that. You want to make sure that we're actually looking at a situation where it's really safe to be in the room with the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got a ton of questions in there.
Oh,
and while you're going through, we're not going to get to all of, we'll get to as many as we can, but real quickly, I just want to repeat to everybody, if you haven't already done so, press the chat button so the chat area shows up. We've already placed the evaluation link in there one time. Click on that. When it opens up, fill it out, submit it. After you submit the evaluation, the required part is over. You can go. You don't have to hang out for the Q&A. All right, the Q&A part is bonus. Keep in mind too, after you fill out the evaluation and you get your confirmation screen, which I'll go over this again more slowly later. The confirmation screen looks like this for those of you who can see. that are not just calling in. If you're just calling in, you'll get an email to the email address you used when you registered with this stuff. But the confirmation screen of a successful submission, the last bullet point has the link to download the slides. So you can click on that and instantly download and save today's slides. And this recording, I mean, we're talking about this recording, sorry, I just cracked myself up, will be on kbrlegal.com within a few days. So Alan, back to you for some Q&A.
Sure. So I will do my best to blitz through. We've got 75 unanswered questions as of now. I don't know how many were.
Some of them will be similar. Some of them are similar in nature.
Okay. Well, I don't know how many were improperly put in the chat, but I apologize if that's the case. But I will try and blitz through as I customarily do, as many as I can get to, and we'll go from there. Jeff, as usual, just let me know when I need to shut up. All right. Getting started. Richard asks, some want to enforce stop sign violations. Individual residents are using smartphones to take videos of people rolling through. Can they be used to issue a violation? Yeah, I mean, that's evidence. So my answer is a very brief, I don't see why not. It's not ideal. You presumably would want to have that video recording that is directed at the stop sign, but I don't have a problem other than the fact that, you know, people might have problems with others recording them using their cell phone riding through these areas. I don't have a problem whatsoever with using that as evidence. Ring cameras on corridor doors, Jeff asked, and I answered. So I'm
we went over
that
that
one. Sorry, Eileen. Hopefully you were listening when I answered. Denise asked, after cameras have been installed with a vote of the majority, what can the community do to remove them? That would likewise be a material alteration. So if you want to take them down, you probably need the exact same vote, but that's one to run by your attorney to be safe. Denise says, without approval of the majority, only a show of hands was held. Well, I hope those hands were counted, and if so, then you've got the approval of the majority, presuming that those hands being raised were a majority. So the fact that it was taken by raising hands rather than some other method doesn't change the answer here. Joanne asks, we have many cameras in the common areas in our condo. We're now looking to add cameras outside the laundry room. Would this be allowed? That is literally the entire content of today's webinar. So the answer is yes, it's allowed, but keep in mind where you are and are not allowed to point it. And I would suggest speaking with your attorney to verify whether a member vote is required before you add to additional common areas. Frank asks, if there's a notice at the community entrance, the video and audio are captured, does that mean condo owners are subject to being taped? The answer is yes. Can these tapes be disseminated by anyone? The answer is probably not. That would be one that you need to talk to your attorney about, who's entitled to get those via records inspection request or discovery in a lawsuit. Generally speaking, the association doesn't have control over what someone does with that video after they get a copy.
Alan, I'm going to answer a quick question from the chat that applies to everybody here, okay? Dennis, I understand your disappointment about HOA board members not getting credit for this class, but keep in mind anything that we advertise, anything, whether it's with GRS, on our own, with anybody else, we clearly state in the registration who gets a CEU and who doesn't. In this case, we advertised that only managers get CEUs. Some of the confusion out there, which again, this is for everybody, some of the confusion out there, the law states, and Alan, don't worry, I'm only quoting the law, I'm not interpreting it. The law states that HOA board members can take any class they want as electives towards their annual requirement of the 4 or 8 credits. However, of those classes that they take, of the any classes they want that they take, those classes have to be approved as courses good for HOA CEUs, which organizations like us get approved by the state. We don't have this class approved yet for that type of CEU credit, which is why it was not placed that way in the advertisement. That's why the advertisement says for CEUs for managers only for this particular class. Alan, back to you. Hope that answers everybody's question about that.
All right. Carlton, I covered this probably after 208 when you posted it, but is installing cameras without condo membership approval and unapproved material alteration to common elements? Depends on your governing documents, whether that's more protective or not. Again, unfortunately, one to probably reach out to association counsel to answer. Paulina asked, this webinar only pertains to 718. Nope, this is everyone. Hopefully you learned that over the time that after 209 that I went through all the material and mentioned HOAs several times. Troy asks, I heard there's new law that condos have to have cameras at every entrance and exit as of January 2025. I would welcome you to send me a copy of that law because I've never heard of it. Ray asked, recognizing I'm ahead of the conversation, but this session's solely about cameras installed and operated. Okay, well, I answered that. This was at 2:14, so we addressed the other issues afterwards. Carrie asked, if we strongly suspect an owner of vandalism, can we install a camera pointing at his elevator and condo if we don't have building-wide cameras? That's one to run by your attorney. The reality is you can probably install it in common areas, but if you're saying that the elevator is only for a particular unit, I know my parents used to live in a building where the elevator opened to an entrance that was only for their unit. That's a different type of situation, but that's probably a limited common area or common element that you don't have the right to install the cameras in. Again, I hate to keep saying you need to run this by your attorney, but unfortunately that's one of them. Is audio allowed or just video? Audio is allowed in some circumstances. We mentioned a lot of the ones where it's not earlier, Frank. Troy asks, is CPTED assessment was due January 1st, 2025. Association needs to remain in substantial compliance with its recommendations. That is true, but yet again, it's not really directed to community associations. You're just kind of getting maybe some better insurance coverage, and a judge might find that you can apply the statute. It doesn't mention HOAs or condos specifically, and it really was intended for apartment complexes. Michael asks, cameras pointed at common areas only? Generally, yes. Rebecca asks, what are your thoughts on every owner in a condo association having access to surveillance cameras? That is a great way to cause major problems in your community and not a good idea at all. William asks, can you put cameras in interior hallways of a condo that will observe neighbors' entrances? I discussed that after William asked that question when Jeff stepped in and asked his question. Steve asks, pros and cons of allowing residents to view a camera. The pros are, if something went wrong, they might see that it wasn't as bad as they thought, and it's not the association's fault or problem. Negatives are they might see that the person that caused the problem was the person that caused it, and then go and physically attack that person. Not really idea. Teresa, you mentioned gyms. Yes, gyms in general, where people are working out, are public areas of the association. The sauna, the area they're changing.
Not locker rooms. No locker rooms, no bathrooms.
None of that is a public area. Cameras on the pool deck, you might be a little bit creepy, but yes, I do think that the pool deck is an okay place to put cameras, as long as you know that hopefully the person that is using those cameras is not using it for the voyeurism purposes we mentioned earlier. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have the camera. It just means you should replace the person who's observing those cameras.
It's especially helpful when, a lot of gyms and pool areas are unsupervised. I mean, God forbid. I mean, the one thing that affected me big time. I mean, I once walked in when I was running Winmore at one point. I walked into the gym one morning and I found a gentleman gone. So anyway,
well, that's along the lines of what I mentioned earlier, where there was an incident at a pool, and candidly, I said that it was an injury just for the purposes of not hurting anyone's feelings, but it was actually a suicide, and they found the guy the next day. Security was there. They didn't go to the pool that night, but if they had cameras that were manned 24/7, presumably they would have known about this sooner and could have reported it. Great point. Phil asks, can we record audio and video at the guardhouse for guests? Questionable, run it by your attorney, just because of the audio component. Ray asks, can an association deny a unit owner's request to mount security cameras outside their unit? Single-story duplexes with zero lot line. Answer is, depends on whether your governing documents say that this is something that you have the ability to control from an architectural standpoint, and where they intend to point these cameras, and whether or not it's within a private area of another unit owner. Kevin, are there restrictions to unit owners where they may place personal cameras and video doorbells We went through this at pretty long length, probably after that was asked. Deborah asks, if someone is trespassing, what are reasonable expectation of recordings? Well, there's no reasonable expectation that it will be recorded, but if you've got a recording, let's hope that it covers that, is really the reasonable expectation. If you've got a video camera that's pointed in the direction of where the people are trespassing, you should have a recording that shows the trespassers.
It's
Otherwise,
the
there's no obligation to have cameras everywhere in a community.
Hey, Alan, it's the top of the hour. We advertise this until 3:10, so I'm leaving this up to you. I know you have appointments, so when you have to go,
Okay.
um,
Let's
how
give it
much?
another 5, Jeff.
Another 5 minutes? Okay. So,
Yeah.
folks, Alan's going to do 5 more minutes, and then after that, I will remain on and I'll go over the evaluation process for those of you that might be having difficulties with it. If you successfully submitted your evaluation, this is bonus. You do not have to remain on. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I've gotten through at least 15, 20 of these questions. We still
More
have
than that.
More than
6.
that, like 30.
So, okay, well, and we still have 66 open, so chances are I'm not getting to everyone. If you want to reach out individually, I'll be happy to answer if I'm able to. If not, again, I apologize, but I might have to direct you back to your counsel. All right, Barbara, can an owner record workers who are assigned to do work in the building? Creepy, but probably not illegal. If as long as they're doing work in an area that this owner is authorized to be in. Karen asks, our board would like to install a few cameras on their own without a service in the public pool area because of night use by non-residents. Is this permissible? Yes, but subject to all of the 20 or 30 things that I mentioned earlier about whether or not you need to get member approval, whether it's an authorized expenditure, etc. Frank, if the sign says video and audio, does that mean someone consents to audio? No, it means you're recording audio. Whether that's legal or not doesn't change based on the fact that it says audio on the sign. David asks, I used to watch a TV show, Person of Interest, great show, by the way, that had the ability for cameras to frame a face. Is there a 4K camera that can show the face of the driver? And I'm going to stop that one just because I'm going to go ahead and say reach out to some of the security companies in Jacksonville, in your area, that might be able to supply that service. I don't know of anything offhand. Person of Interest was a show about ridiculous advanced technology being used. So I just don't know that that technology exists. I think that show was on about 10 years ago. So I don't have an answer for you, but if you reach out to the security companies in your area, they should be able to give you a much better picture than some lawyer who's giving you a webinar. Sam asks, does a sign entering a room, for instance, that you're being video and audio recorded satisfy the need to consent to being recorded? Video-wise, yes. Audio-wise, talk to your attorney. Corinne, are videos considered official records? We went through that in detail, so that was probably after that question was asked. Catherine asks, is there a distinction to be made by using the term security cameras versus surveillance cameras? A security camera is generally one that's going to be observed on a regular basis. A surveillance camera could mean, and in reality, there's no distinction. What I would suggest is use more than just that term. Say whether you're actually monitoring it. Say how long it's kept. Put something in the signage that clarifies what you're actually doing here, or at least in a policy, and run that signage and that policy by your counsel before it gets adopted. Private cameras on owners' doors saying it's for security, but they've often recorded video and audio and sent clips to others complaining or making accusations about what they're seeing. Whether it's a violation is up to your individual board. There's really nothing that automatically makes this problematic. It just comes down to your particular circumstances. Jackie, ring doorbells on owner doors along a condo catwalk. Can they record conversations? Do we need a sign that owners have ring doorbells? They are not your doorbells, so you do not have that obligation as an HOA or a condo. And we talked about a lot of the other stuff. Under 718, is signage required if you have cameras? No, but it is required under separate statutes that are mentioned in the slides that you'll get a copy of once you complete your survey. We have them 1 more minute. Don't call them security cameras, call them surveillance cameras. All right, thanks, Jeff. Tito asked, difference in liability of security versus surveillance? No, but difference in what you say you're doing with it versus what you're actually doing with it. Frank, is there a stipulation on how many owners or board members can have access to the cameras? There's no specific number, but I would limit it to the people that need access. Do we need a designated group to monitor the cameras? Yes, if they're going to be monitored. Barbara asks, you discuss condos with respect to associations considering cameras. What about individual owner that wants to put a Ring doorbell camera and they do own their doors? Can a penthouse owner place cameras on what are common elements or limited common elements? The answer depends to number two. Can a penthouse owner place the cameras on common elements or limited common elements? Depends on your declaration. And can an owner put a Ring doorbell camera on if they own their doors? Yes, subject to all the limitations we mentioned earlier. It is 3:05 and I am shutting my mouth for a few minutes.
Yeah, only a few minutes. Is that a promise? So, folks, Alan, we want to thank you. Courtney, we want to thank you as well. I'm going to remain on. Alan, before you head out, anything else you want to let everybody know about? I know you've got the Orlando Expo coming up soon. You want to tell everybody about that for those in attendance in that area?
Yeah, so we do have the Orlando Condo and HOA Expo. I think that is, was it November 12th? Let me check my calendar. Yeah, November 12th. I will be teaching a class in the morning. It will not be this one, so you don't have to worry about duplicating if you choose to come by and take it. I'll also be teaching the legal update in the afternoon, and Chuck, Anthony, and myself will all be there. And if Jeff feels like taking a trip down from, the great state north of here, he's welcome to stop by as well. But we'll have a booth. I might not be there most of the time, but you'll find me somewhere around. I'll probably be wearing a bright shirt that has this little logo on it, just like Jeff's. And hopefully you'll come and stop by, say hi if you enjoyed. Yep, there you go. If you enjoyed the class, feel free to come say hi to me. If you didn't enjoy the class, you can talk to Chuck. But hopefully everyone got a little bit, or hopefully even a lot, out of this class. Thank you to Courtney, as always, and GRS for having us today. Jeff, thanks for everything that you do, brother. You're appreciated. And if anyone wants to reach me, my email address is going to be the easiest way. I do tend to post on LinkedIn probably more than I should, but usually 3-4 times a week, I'll try and either post that we've got an event coming up that's free, or just a little tidbit on how to be a better lawyer, mediator, HOA or condo board member or manager. So feel free to follow. But if you need anything, from a legal nature, feel free to email me, as@kbrlegal.com.
Thanks, Alan. And Joe and a few others said, excellent seminar. You have helped make up my mind not to get cameras in our community. And I saw a few comments like that. So
Yeah.
this is
Wasn't the intent, but I appreciate that you're taking it to heart.